So we are going to start a very special session. This session is called Wake Up Session. After a very hectic morning session and very good presentations and then having a wonderful lunch, this is a perfect time to take a nap. And we thought that a panel discussion would help you to take even a deeper nap. So we ruined your plans. And now the plan is to bring a motivational speaker to wake you up so you have some energy, and by the time we start the panel discussion, you are fully awake. So with this, I would like to request Mr. Dheeraj Wadhwani to please come on the stage and introduce the next speaker, the motivational speaker.
Good afternoon, everyone. Are we all awake? Well, just in case not, I'm sure you're going to be. Now we're going to have Mr. Shridhar Sampath, the next speaker. He's the founder of Motivaluate. He's a certified public accountant and a chartered accountant with over 25 years of experience in financing, accounting, budgeting, treasury, and audit. Shridhar works with individuals, business owners, and organizations to help them achieve financial leadership and excellence by inspiring the bottom line through better business decisions, through practical ideas on business acumen, financial tools, leaderships, and communication skill training. Before setting up Motivaluate, Shridhar was the Eastern Hemisphere Regional Financial Controller of Boritz International, a multinational oil and gas service organization. Prior to that, he held various positions in operational finance and treasury with Baker Hughes for over 10 years. During his career, he has worked in Middle East, Europe, North Africa, Russia, Kazakhstan, and Southeast Asia. He is an energetic and dynamic professional, keynote speaker, and a trainer in areas of business acumen, financial skills, leadership, and communication. His passion for speaking and his electrifying personality are legendary that you will witness. Please welcome Shridhar Sampath.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good afternoon.
I'm glad some of you are awake. How many of you responded to this greeting of mine? Okay, how many of you, didn't know what's happening and said, okay, let me wake up now? Be honest. And how many of you really do not care whether it's afternoon or the morning? Thank you very much. You're being honest. I like honesty. Here's a question to you. How many of you think that we are returning to good times? Okay, that's about 50% of the audience think we are returning to good times. So those of you who don't believe we are returning to good times, where do you think we are heading? Sorry? To the bad times? You still think we're heading to the bad times? I believe we're heading to the good times. And I have a very simple question to all of you CFOs. Is this a time to lead or to manage? Okay, that's like 10% of the audience saying always the time to lead.
No, both.
So or do both. I was in college, and one of our professors asked me, what is direct costs, and I answered it. And he asked me some other question, and for some reason he asked me a particular example of cost, and he said, is this a direct or indirect cost? And I said both. And he asked me one question after that, which I don't want to ask you. He said, are you male or female? I looked at him. I said, I wish I could say both. But you'd think I'm, going the wrong direction. But here it is, ladies and gentlemen. Those of you who believe that we need to lead, yes. And I'm not surprised that we are in a minority. Because the last 5 years, guess what? We have been managing for austerity. Am I right? We have been managing for austerity. Everything that we did, and you've seen the presentation since the morning, The first speaker, Mr. Sanjeev Mehta, said, you know, it's not about cost control. I think even Ramesh said, it's not how much can we cut costs. You can cut it down to the bone, but what after that? But that's what we have been doing all along, managing for austerity. And since about 50% of the audience felt that we're returning to good times, and I believe that there's another 20-25% who don't want to say that we're returning to good times because we are accountants and we are, you know, we've been drilled into being conservative. We don't want to believe that the good times are coming back. I'm here to tell you, yes, we are getting back to the good times. And my point is very simple. We need to learn how to lead for prosperity. Because the strategies that we had managing for austerity will not work while we want to lead for prosperity. And I'll say that again. The strategies that we used to manage for austerity will not work when we want to lead for prosperity. But what's the big difference? Sanjeev said that he gave a great presentation and he talked all about having a great vision. We had people speaking about innovation. Ramesh spoke about innovation. The gentleman from SAP spoke about innovation. How does one lead for prosperity? How does one lead for prosperity? Is it an easy task? Let me ask you this question. How does one take those steps that everybody since the morning has been speaking about? How do you get that vision? How many of you have a great vision in your organization? 2, 3 hands. Okay, 4, 5. How many of you have a great vision in your organization? Thank you very much. I think I'll have to work a lot more hard to keep this audience awake. How many of you can stand up and recite your organization's vision as if it were your own today and now? 1 out of a room of, okay, 2. I think there's a slow motion happening. Okay, 3. 4. Come on. When I ask a question, I want you to answer me back, please. If you have your BlackBerry switched on and it's distracting you, please switch them off. I've given off mine to the young lady here. Thank you, Jaya. How many of you, if you cannot recite the vision of your organization, how do you think you are going to get your organization moving in the direction that the organization wants you to go? Now, what do leaders do? They lead. And is leadership, what is leadership all about? It's about a vision? Creating a vision?
Creating a strategy, implementation plan, understanding what are the critical success factors, what are the leading indicators, how to monitor them, and then how to make sure that they provide.
I'm going to give him a round of applause, please, first. Brilliant. A great definition, but I'm going to differ with you slightly, Doctor. I believe it's more of implementation and managing rather than leading. And I'm going to share with you a leadership. Yes, sir, before you come to that.
Leading is like guiding your people to the company's vision. That's leading.
Brilliant. Any other thoughts on what is leadership all about?
It's about creating other leaders.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. It's about creating other leaders. Yes, sir.
Creating an influence. Creating an influence.
Creating an influence to do what? To achieve something. Superb. What I'd like to share with you is a definition that's been around for about 25 years now. That's propagated by 2 highly accomplished gentlemen, Mr. Jim Kouzes and Mr. Barry Posner from the University of Santa Clara. Over the last 25 years, after studying over 500,000 live cases and over 1 million case studies, they have come about with this simple definition that I'd like to share with you. And here it is. Oops. This is what I was afraid of. There you go. The art of mobilizing others to want to struggle towards a shared vision. The art of mobilizing others. You said it. It's about creating leaders. It's about influencing people. It's all in there. Whatever you have said, it's all in there. The art of mobilizing others to want to struggle towards a shared aspiration. And they've come about this vision by over 1.5 million case studies, and the beauty of it is that even today, their research is ongoing. As they continue to do the research, they continue to update the case studies, they continue to update the data. And here's what they believe in. That is, leaders are not what leaders do. Leaders are not what leaders do, but leaders are what leaders do more often, again and again and again. So I'll repeat that. Leaders are not what leaders do, but leaders are what leaders do over and over and over again. And they've come about with the 5 exemplary practices of leadership. And that's what I'd like to share with you. Because if we are going to lead for prosperity, I think what I'm going to tell you now will help you understand how do you lead. Now, how many of you CFOs in this room work at least 60 hours a week? Come on, be honest, at least 60 hours. So the rest of you don't work 60 hours, okay? How many of you work 70 hours? Some of you. Is it stressful to work 60, 70 hours? Very stressful? Okay, how many times you go to sleep well at night thinking that, okay, nobody is robbing the bank? Sometimes do you think about it? How do you create an organization that can ensure that you can sleep well? That can ensure that you can sleep well while others do the hard work. It's about leading. And here's what it is. The first practice that I'd like to share with you is what the authors of the Leadership Challenge, the book called The Leadership Challenge, and if you have not read it, I recommend it, highly recommend it, that you read the book called The Leadership Challenge by Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner. It covers case studies on any known problem that you may have today or tomorrow. And it'll help you, guide you through that process. And the first practice they talk about is modeling the way. What is modeling the way all about? Leading the way. How do you lead the way? Sorry? Set examples of what? Set examples of what? Yes, you're on the right track.
I would say it's
The practices?
creating a followership.
Creating a followership. The word I'm looking for, ladies and gentlemen, is creating the values, the boundary posts within which you want the people to move. If you don't create the boundary posts, most likely people will go in different directions. And that's not surprising. We have seen it all through. I mean, just yesterday or day before, there was the story of 2 senior executives of a company here who were convicted of fraud in Dubai. If that organization had a clear value system, they couldn't have gone astray. I used to work for a company called Baker Hughes for about 10 years. A company that if I get a chance, I'll probably go and work again. I swear by that company. Between 98 and 2000, I wasn't too impressed with what was happening. But in 2000 or 2001, there was a management change, and they took 200 of their top executives across to Switzerland, where they locked them in a room, or probably a large garden, I don't know which one. And they created the core values and the keys to success of that organization. And a beautiful vision that each employee could relate with. And I'll give you a small analogy of that. How many of you have traveled by bus from here to Abu Dhabi maybe? Or from anywhere to anywhere by bus? When you get onto the bus, do you ask where's the bus going? Do you find out? Right? Creating those values was something similar to creating a bus in which we know whether I want to be on that bus or I want to be off the bus. Modeling the way is about giving that clear direction, those goalposts, and saying, this bus is going to Abu Dhabi, gentlemen. If you want to be on that bus, be there. If you don't want to, if you want to go to Sharjah, you're on the wrong bus. And that was beautiful because between 2000 and 2008 when I left, Baker Hughes saw the biggest growth in its share price. In my opinion, a lot of it was contributed because they had very clear values. A clear vision. They knew which way they were shooting, they knew who had to be on the bus, and they made sure that the people who were not supposed to be on the bus got off it as fast as possible. But that's where the CFO's role comes in influencing. Who said influencing here? Influencing others to model the way. Ask the question, What are those values that you hold dear to your organization? Clarify those values. And most importantly, somebody here set an example. Yes, set an example of those who align themselves to the vision, to the values of the company. Do you have a clear value statement in your organization? Ask yourself, and I'd like you to, if you have a pen and paper in front of you, ask that question to yourself. Do we have a clear set of value statement in our organization? But more importantly, are we all aligned towards it? And do we set an example? Because if you do not, you can have that stray case who runs off in one direction, and then all it requires is one bad news story to destroy years and man hours of hard work. All it requires is one bad news story to destroy years and man hours of hard work. As a CFO, that is something you would not want to happen. So it's very important to model the way, and that requires leading for prosperity. The next, some of you said, yes, we have a vision and that you know the vision. One of the things that I've realized about great organizations is that they just don't have a vision. I train in Abu Dhabi with the ADNOC group of companies, and one of the questions that I always ask, and I train on finance and business and strategy, one of the questions I always ask is, what is the vision of your company? And each of those participants goes, bup, 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 bup. Everybody has been through induction. Everybody has been through orientation, but none of them can recite the vision of the company. Here's what it is. How many of you have children at home? You have children? When the children come along and they're growing up, do you tell them, this is what we'd like to go towards, and do you model the way for them? Do you show them the vision? Do you talk to them about what the vision will be? So ever since I started my entrepreneurial journey, one of the biggest tasks I've had is not about my employees. I have very few employees. But the bigger task has been getting my family to go along with me and sharing the vision. Most important thing is communicating that vision. And here's what it is. The lady from Bait.com, Suha, I do not know whether you noticed it. She said one thing. We not only talk about our values, but we talk to them at regular intervals. Why do you think Bait.com is successful? Because they communicate that vision clearly. How many of you have heard of the speech by Martin Luther King? I have a dream. If you haven't, go to the YouTube. Type in there, I have a dream, Martin Luther King, and watch that speech. You will get an example of how you can communicate a vision to your people. Because if you are not creating that vision in pictorial terms for them, in the terms by which it affects their emotions, their children's future, you are not creating a strong enough vision in their eyes. But again, as a CFO, why do you need to communicate that vision? How many of you really communicate your organization's vision well? Be honest and raise your hands. I don't expect anybody to raise their hands. I'm just joking. If you don't, you must. The company that I talked to you about, Baker Hughes, in 2007, changed their CFO. They brought in a CFO from BP. And one of the jobs that the gentleman, I forget his name, had was to inspire a vision of a hugely, a business partner-oriented shared services. And here's what he did. He set up conference calls with the over 2,000 people in finance alone within the organization, and every week talked to them about his vision. Some of us would listen on and say, gosh, how boring can he be? But it was very simple. His remit was that within 2 years, he had to convert that organization from a company that had product lines where everybody was focused on moving in different directions, from a product line focus, getting them all to one Baker Hughes. And he achieved that within 2 years. And as a finance professional, I'm proud of him because he showed those exemplary leadership characteristics that helped that organization save billions of dollars by just getting them to align to one vision. And if you take do you know what's the difference between a shotgun and a rifle? A shotgun, if I were to shoot here and I were to look at you gentlemen and aim at you and shoot, I would probably not know whether it's going to hit you. It would probably go and hit Ramesh on this end and this gentleman on this end. But if I had a rifle and I shot from here, and especially if it was a telescopic rifle, I'm pretty much sure I'll get your heart. That's what a vision is all about. If you want people to get together and really do that, you must communicate. It's not enough to have a vision. Most organizations, you go to their websites, they have a great vision written up there. You ask their people, they don't know the vision. Those of them who know it very sketchily. And even if they reproduce it to you, sometimes you go, ouch, how could he use those words? And those of you who are setting up enterprises now, who are looking at entrepreneurship, I would like to ask you as well, if you're going in that direction, it's a great time to start, to keep repeating that vision over and over again so that people achieve it. Now these two things, here it is. And what is a vision? I'd like, if you want to write it down, please write it down, because there's a beautiful definition of a vision. And I always look at it and ask myself, how could I have not got this vision myself? It's very simple. It's an ideal and a unique image of the future for a common good. The key words are not the image. The key words are common good. Unilever's objective, the purpose, as Sanjeev said this morning, is not about shareholder value. It's about satisfying the customer, the consumer's need. Then he said the customer's need, and then he said one more thing which I've forgotten now. Very clear. I always like Jack Welch's statement, number one or number two in the business or out. How difficult is it for when you, as you wake up that morning and you head to office, am I going to make this company number one or number two? Whatever I do, am I going to make it number one or number two? Or what else should I do? But when you have these long-winded visions, it's pretty much difficult. But I would like to ask you this question. How many of you communicate that vision well to your organization? Because if you don't, it's a good time to start. Because if you want to lead for prosperity, you better want to start now. The longer you wait for organization, for your CEO to come along and to tell you what to do, you've lost valuable time, and you could have people who should not be on the bus. And when you have the wrong people on the bus, risk increases. When risk increases, obviously there are losses to be contended with. Ask yourself that. Okay. We talked about this morning. In fact, when I was sitting here and listening to all these presentations, I said, oh my God, these guys have spoken about whatever I wanted to speak about. But what I liked is that they all spoke about the what. Ramesh spoke eloquently about innovating. Now, how do you create, and Ramesh, if I may disagree with you a little bit on what you said. You said innovation needs to be driven top down. You said get your C-suite people to innovate. I have a slightly different take on it. In my opinion, innovation always starts bottoms up. The smartest decisions, believe me, will come from the people who are in front of the customer. If you take, whether it's the Band-Aid or Velcro, they did not come from a C-suite executive. They came from somebody smart down. And you gave the example yourself. You said an intern walked into that company, the case study, and said he just marked it. So it's, at times, I believe that innovation is everybody's business. It's not just the C-suite, but more importantly, how do you create that environment where people can challenge the process? It's not about challenging the process. It's about creating an environment where people can challenge the process. And you answer that question in there.
The ideas come from the bottom.
Yes.
But capturing it and converting it is at the top.
Thank you very much. Okay, now I got it. Probably my slightly thicker head didn't get it straight at that time. The ideas do come from the bottom, but it is up to the leadership to encourage that process so that more ideas surface, and then you capture the best ones and implement it. But how do you create that environment? Innovation never works, and challenging the process never works in an organization where you ridicule each other.
Empowerment.
Thank you very much. Empowerment is an important part of that, and I'll come to that just after this. Challenging the process. How many of you work in organizations, and how many of us work in organizations where the moment you come out with a brilliant idea, somebody out there says, hey, shut up, this is not the way it's done here. This is how we do it. Can you relate to that? How many of you, I was talking to a potential client, I just used the word, a potential client, and he said, you know, Shridhar, what's the problem we have in our organization? We have done so well, we don't see the need to change. I didn't know what to tell him. Should I tell him Nokia? Should I tell him, whichever organization? I mean, if you stop innovation, if you don't want to improve upon what you have, you are going to have a serious problem pretty soon. But who has the biggest risk if you don't innovate? It is the business. But as the CFO, you are saddled with the responsibility of making sure it doesn't happen. And Ramesh said it very eloquently. He said it is up to us CFOs to make sure that innovation happens. And that happens only by creating an environment where people can experiment and take risks. I like the idea that you gave. Create a budget for it. But more importantly, don't suddenly start holding that budget onto it and saying, no, we have a budget of $1 million dirhams, so we'll not do, we'll select the projects that are going to be successful. You've lost innovation right before you started. You need to let people move, make mistakes. And once they've made the mistakes, yes, you will learn by experiment. And you should know only when to stop it and not stop it before it has started sprouting. But I believe if you want to lead for prosperity, especially in a time when it's changing, you need to let your people challenge every process that you have. If you're not challenging the process enough, if not today, you will have a problem in a few months to come, or a few years. And history has shown that those organizations that don't innovate generally die a faster death. They'll stay around for a little while until something happens. And thank you very much. You kind of, you thought what I was going to say next and you said empowerment. But while you create that environment of trust, you need to enable others. I'm sure I see a lot of gray hairs and no hair here. So I'm going to ask you a question. During your careers, as you reach the stage of gray hairs or no hair, how many of you have felt that, when your boss said or did something that made you feel like, ouch? You cringe and you feel powerless. Have you had those situations? Come on, be honest. If you have had those situations, raise your hand. Your boss may not be around here. If you have gray hair, he probably is somewhere, I don't know where. And how many times have you heard somebody who said or did something that made you feel powerful, that you felt that you could knock the entire world? But why? Let me ask you this third question. How many of you say some things or do things within your organizations that make your peers, your colleagues, your subordinates feel powerless? You do? Why do we do it?
Why?
Whenever you've done it, you said sometimes you do it. Why does it happen?
Look for clarity.
You may look for clarity. Sometimes you don't have the time. Sometimes you're busy doing something and your secretary walks in and says, can I have a moment please? No, I'm very busy. Get out from here. Ouch. It happens. Will they feel powerless at that moment? And when they feel powerless, what happens? Do they perform at their best? When they don't perform at the best, does your risk increase? When your risk increases, does your exposure to other problems increase as well? Absolutely. Here's the point I'm making. It's okay to challenge the process, and you need to create the environment to challenge the process, but it's very important to raise their competence levels so that you're fostering collaboration between people. So that when they stand at a precipice like this and are ready to fall, they have a system below that will hold them. Because when they experiment and they innovate, when they challenge the process, when they come and sometimes challenge you, you need to let them fall. They will make mistakes, and then you need to empower them to do better. One of the things that happens during any difficult time, and we are talking about bad times, is that one of the first few budgets that gets cancelled is the empowerment budget. And I feel the pain. I'm a trainer. We don't get the business that we're supposed to get. But that's not the point. Here's what I argue with my clients. I said, now that you have to work with less, what is the next best thing you can do? Obviously, upskill them. You work with less and you don't upskill them, you get more of bad things happening. The number of organizations that I know of that have struggled, not because they did not have the right people, but because they did not empower them during these difficult times, is phenomenal. And I'm sure you know of them as well. But there was one company that I know very well that's set empowerment, and they've done an example of it. A company called EMAR. And I know this because I have a friend who is in an organization, and here's what he said. He said, Shridhar, the chairman of EMAR, created the process in such a way, and he said, I want people to be so ready, that when the time comes to run, we are ready to fly. When the time comes to run, we are ready to fly. And that's probably the secret on why EMAR is today one of the best performing stocks in this part of the world. Kudos to that organization, the leadership within that organization, and what they have done. My point is very simple. As you change from the bad times to the good times, your people, especially those to whom you have coaxed into staying on in the organization, saying, no, we have a bad time, stay back here, are probably going to be looking for options as the change comes to the good times. If you do not invest on them now, you will lose the people who are with you in the bad times and probably end up with a higher risk and more exposure. And as a result, in order to lead for prosperity, you need to ensure that you're enabling others to act. I want you to ask yourselves, are you enabling others to act sufficiently enough within your organization? Because if you aren't, then there is a gap out there that you need to fill up pretty fast. One of our clients came to us and said, Shridhar, we are getting into the good times. And I was very proud of that organization because they said, we want to create a finance academy to take our clerks and our junior accountants at least a grade or two higher, to the extent of taking our senior business unit controllers to be able to sit on the table and challenge the CEOs. I salute that company. Not because they are my clients and they're giving us business, but very simple, the thought of empowering and enabling their people to act is in itself very powerful. And it requires a mindset change. It requires leadership, leading towards prosperity. And the last thing, encouraging the heart. Now this is the most difficult. This is the most difficult. Sanjeev mentioned it, Ramesh mentioned it as well, and I keep looking at it and saying, how many of you have daily or weekly situations within your organization where you call upon an employee and say, man, you've done a great job, and give him a small little award for either aligning himself to the values of the company that you hold so dear, or for him espousing the vision of the company, or for challenging and taking risk. My daughter goes to a school called Dubai International Academy. She used to go to another school, and I'm not going to name that school. And she used to struggle to express herself. She used to struggle to stand up in front of the room and say something. Not that she was shy, but because she was never given the opportunity. She moved to the school, and within weeks, actually, yes, within 6 to 8 weeks, we saw a huge transformation. But the best part was when a situation where we had gone to her school assembly and where she stood up and said, I'd like to recognize the services of, I would like to recognize Zoya for risk taking. Zoya is her classmate, and they're year 6 to, they're about 11 years old. I'd like to recognize Zoya for taking risks. I had never seen that, and I looked at her and I said, what do you know about taking risks? So after the meeting was over, the assembly was over, she came over, I asked her, what did Zoya do? Dad, yesterday when we were asked some questions, everybody was hesitating to answer. Zoya said, I will answer. She stood up and she answered. So I said, was the answer right? I'm an Indian, right? I'm driven by being correct. And I'm a strict parent as well. She said, no, Dad, the answer was wrong. Then why did you appreciate her? Dad, because she took the risk when nobody else was ready to answer. Ouch. It hurt. I asked myself, what was I doing? Am I letting my people, the team around me, make enough mistakes? Am I encouraging risk taking within my organization? It's a small little thing, a small 5x6 card that says, I appreciate Zoya for taking a risk. Could we do these things in our organizations? Or do we keep them for the annual employee party? Because if you're not encouraging the heart of your people over and over and over again, by the time the annual employee party comes along, they would have forgotten. They would have forgotten not that they did something good, but they would have forgotten the feeling of being appreciated. It's important. There's a nice saying, when you have, I think Narayan Murthy says this very well. He says, the good news takes the stairs, the bad news takes the elevator. But when it comes to employee empowerment and encouragement, I would like to twist that around and say, the good news always should take the elevator. When something good happens within your organization, call that person, stand him in front of everybody and say, you've done a fantastic job. And when something goes wrong, take your time to analyze it, take that person in private and say, what went wrong and what can we learn from it? But ask yourself, are you encouraging the hearts and minds of your people enough to lead for prosperity? Because if you aren't, the same situation arises. Your good people will leave. What you'll be left with is the people you don't want on your bus. The moment you have people who you don't want on your bus, your risk increases, your job becomes more difficult, and guess what? Somebody said they work for 60 hours, you'll probably end up working 80 hours a week. Important to have the right people on the bus. So, as I come to the end of my session, I'd like to share with you the fundamentals that Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner said. They said leadership is everyone's business. If you don't agree with this, please tell me, because I believe that it is true. It is every person's business, every person in this room, every person in your organization. It is a relationship that you build with people. Leadership is not one-off. It's self-development. If you're not developing yourself well enough, you do have a problem. And the best leaders are the best learners, but I would like to go to this one. Leadership is an aspiration and a choice. It's a choice that you clearly make. Do I want to be the leader or don't I? If you don't want to, then you can continue managing for austerity. And there's only so much that you can cut the flesh off your bone, because that will come to a point where you'll have to cut your feet. But if you want to lead your people to prosperity, you can, because leaders make a difference. The question I want to ask you is, do you want to be a leader that makes that difference? If you do, please raise both your hands. Okay, those of you who are around who see people not raising their hands, watch them. Thank you very much. Now everybody raises their hands. With that, I'd like to say thank you very much. I don't think we have time for questions. Any questions? I'm outside. I can answer questions. I'll be here until the end of the day. You can connect with us if you'd like to. Good afternoon.